Day two of the NFL Draft Combine just finished up, and it's finally time to release Mock Draft 1.0. Let's get into it. Mock Draft 1.0, no trades, first round only. Of course, that might expand over time, but we want to keep it basic and we want to get to the point here in today's video. At number one, talking about get to the point, death taxes, and Caleb Williams is going to be the number one overall pick. It's really, whether if you prefer Justin Fields or Caleb Williams, what it comes down to is that the Chicago Bears can reset the quarterback clock. Of course, quarterback is the most important position, maybe in all of sports. But if you have the opportunity to maybe replace the talent that you already have with someone on the same level and reset the quarterback clock, I think it's a win-win for the Chicago Bears. Of Caleb Williams, of course, he's going to come in with a lot of pressure, and he's going to come in with, of course, a lot of potential as well. So you're kind of banking that he can be on the level of a Patrick Mahomes. Franchise potential changer is what you aim for with the number one pick. The Bears take their shot at Caleb Williams. At number two, for weeks, if you asked me to do this video a couple weeks back, it would have been Drake Maye, and some more Drake Maye. However, I think I'm starting to lean more so to Jayden Daniels. And I think it's just that those are the rumors going around. Of course, those are the rumors. It's also the season of smoke screens here in draft season, as the Commanders might be, hey, we're going to take Jayden Daniels. Somebody trade up with us so we can get more draft capital. It is the season of smoke screens for all 32 NFL GMs. But I think when you look at a prospect for prospect, talent for talent, Jayden Daniels with that mobility might have a higher ceiling than Drake Maye in this class. And you can argue he has the highest ceiling, out of anybody. Of course, this is a guy at Arizona State that had some great and talented players around him. Guys like Diamante Traynor, who went unnoticed. Guys like Brandon Ayuk. And he struggled, but he transferred to a much harder conference in the SEC, took over the job at LSU, and of course, two back-to-back seasons where he progressed a lot over these last 2 years, and he capped it off with winning the Heisman. You can't get much better than that for Jayden Daniels. I'm going to go with him. There's a new, head coaching staff here. Of course, Dan Quinn came over from the Dallas Cowboys. And hey, if there's anybody that knows how to beat that defense, it's going to be Dan Quinn. So Jayden Daniels is going to be the number two pick based off of upside. But again, if you want to have Drake Maye over Jayden Daniels, I'm not going to fight you, right? It's only one spot, and I'm not going to fight you because at number three, I think the Patriots get the guy that they want. And if they don't want him, of course, this is the guy that works probably the best within structure in an offense. It is a new aged New England Patriots, no pun intended, with Jerod Mayo taking over as the head coach. But Drake Maye, I think, is a guy that can come in and he can make all the throws for the New England Patriots. He can do whatever they need. He's one of the younger quarterbacks in this older class. And I think he's shown a lot of potential to be elite. He's shown, of course, flashes. We've seen the comparisons to guys like Justin Herbert, to guys like even a Josh Allen. I think that's on the higher end of his potential. But Drake Maye has that potential. And of course, if you surround him with some pieces, unlike they didn't really do with Mac Jones, Drake Maye could be your quarterback of the future. Of course, Mac Jones is also a piece that could be traded. Probably not for much. Drake Maye, you need to do it right this time. So let's restart the quarterback clock. Let's get a guy that ultimately has more potential than Mac Jones and can be the guy going forward. It also helps that they have a new guy at the head coaching helm for the first time in 20 plus years. At number four, Marvin Harrison Jr. And, no matter how you guys want to split it, I think these are going to be the top four picks in the NFL draft, no matter what team it is. I think the three quarterbacks of Williams, Daniels, and Drake Maye will be the top three. And Marvin Harrison at number four, you get to help out a guy in Kyler Murray, a guy that this team wasn't sure about, as most people thought that the Cardinals were in a position that they were going to have the number one pick to get Caleb Williams. Before last year, we saw, a bunch of Photoshop jobs of Caleb Williams in a Cardinals uniform. We had some people telling Caleb Williams, stay in college if Arizona has the number one pick. But the team actually wasn't as bad as we all thought they would be. Of course, when Kyler Murray came back, we knew this dude is playing for his job, whether if it's in Arizona or in another spot in 2024. And he came out and he showed out. I think he had a pretty solid second half of the season. Again, not a lot around him. But with the emergence of Trey McBride, and of course, if they bring Hollywood Brown back in free agency, I think if you have an offense with Kyler Murray, James Conner, or whatever running back they want to draft, of course, it's also a stacked running back class they can pair with guys like Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, who's on the come up in this offense, a solid offensive line. The defense has some potential. I think Arizona could be in a position where they can make some noise next year to maybe, again, if all the cards fall right, to be a wild card fighter. At number 5, and this is where the draft starts, if you want to say that. You could go receiver here. Of course, we don't know the futures of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, you name it. I mean, Quentin Johnston didn't show any signs of greatness last year as a rookie. He, in fact, was maybe one of the worst receivers in the league, no matter how long they've been in the league, right? Quentin Johnston was one of the worst receivers entirely. So you could say, hey, Keenan Allen's getting up there. I think he is a for-lifer in Los Angeles, but if they decide, hey, let's get rid of Keenan Allen, let's start fresh, let's trade Mike Williams, you could go after Malik Nabers, a guy that is electric with the ball in his hands, either with, down the field or with a shorter route, after the catch. I think he has probably the most playmaking ability, yards after the catch is my point I'm trying to make. Malik Nabers, electric. You could go him here. You could go Joe Alt to protect Justin Herbert, especially in an offense that's going to lean on the run, especially with Jim Harbaugh, coming back to the pros. And it doesn't matter what level he's been at, whether if it was with Colin Kaepernick back in the day, of course, about 10 years ago. It was a run-focused offense. It was a pistol-focused offense at the professional level, if you can believe it. And then he goes to college and dominates, at the collegiate level. Didn't always win at the highest level, but he still dominated at Michigan, one of the toughest programs, with the run. That's just his identity. That's what he wants to do. And he's already said, we want to lean on the run here in Los Angeles. So you could go Joe Alt. You could go Malik Nabers if you want to help out in the receiving core. But I think a happy medium between the electric wide receivers and the offensive line approach, just for the fact that they do have Rashawn Slater, and I don't know if you want to play Joe Alt at right tackle. I'm going to go Brock Bowers. I think this is a guy that well, again, I'll say this. Keenan Allen will be back in the Charger uniform next season. I know he's getting older, and I know he has health concerns, but when you have an offense with Keenan Allen, Brock Bowers, and whoever you want to throw on that wide receiver 2 slot, I think this offense can get by, especially if they're a run-focused offense. Their offensive line is not the greatest, but it is a deeper offensive tackle class. So, again, in a world where we would do trades, maybe they trade back and grab an Olu Fashanu to take on that right side of the line, or they trade back into the first round to grab an Aquarius Mims or a J.C. Latham. The Chargers have a lot of options, but as of right now, I think Brock Bowers, some people have described him as Kyle Pitts as a prospect with blocking ability. And that to me just kind of screams like George Kittle. So if you get a George Kittle that can block, whether in the pass game and the run game, but he can also be a huge contributor when it comes into the passing game, it's a happy medium between the electric wide receivers and the offensive linemen. So Brock Bowers to the Chargers here at number 5. At number 6, we're going to speed it up here. Malik Nabers, of course, the Giants, they need a quarterback. Of course, in a draft that I would have trades, maybe they trade up for a guy like Jaden Daniels or Drake May, as we've heard those buzz going around here, as they might trade up to 3 for a guy like Drake May. But in this world, they don't have the ability to trade up. They're going to draft the best weapon available for a quarterback they just paid a lot of money to in Daniel Jones. Malik Nabers, of course, electric after the catch. At number 7, the Titans are gifted Joe Alt, of course, a guy that has the ideal size and frame, 6'8", of course, close to 300 pounds. And this is a guy that only allowed 1 sack in his entire collegiate career. He is going to protect a guy in Will Levis who didn't have much around him in his half of a season last year, as he rode the bench for a majority of it. But when Will Levis stepped in, I was not a Will Levis believer prior, but when he stepped in, he showed signs and flashes of greatness, with a disappointing Treylon Burks, really, who has 1 good game a year, it seems like. D-Hop is still D-Hop, but he's not the same elite all-pro version. Of course, he's getting older, right? Derrick Henry, of course, take a step back with the poor offensive line, and Will Levis just got beat up game after game. So if you think you have your guy in Will Levis, which I think they do, you get Joe Alt, and you have your franchise left tackle, hopefully, for the next 10 to 15 years. At number 8, I'm going to go a little bit vanilla here. And, in my opinion, I'm going to make this pick because I do these mock drafts. Last year I did this as well as this year. I want to continue that. I want to, of course, keep some analysis in it and why the teams would do this pick. But I do these drafts more so on what I think the teams will do in these exact scenarios. So the Atlanta Falcons are on the clock. New head coach Raheem Morris. He likes those athletic, bendy edges. And I think the most athletic edge in this class is Dallas Turner. This is a guy that showed out in the combine yesterday, and he's of course going to this the defensive scheme of Raheem Morris, and I think he has a lot of potential. Of course, close to home at this time now at the professional level. At pick 9, this is another interesting spot. I have battled with the idea of going with tackle here. Of course, giving more help to a guy like Caleb Williams. You already have Caleb Williams, right? You have DJ Moore. You have a solid running back waiting to take over, and a guy like Roschon Johnson. I think you have a lot of pieces around him. So why not? Let's protect him, because Justin Fields, that was one of the biggest things that we gave it to his favor, was he never really had protection. So we could go with Olu Fashanu. We could go to Talise Fuaga, right? Out of Oregon State. Love the Beavers, by the way. But I'm going to just continue to give this dude as many options as possible, because Justin Fields, his backbone of an argument for why he didn't pan out as well as we thought he would, he didn't have help. So this time around, if you're the Chicago Bears, let's give this young quarterback too many options. Let's give him so many options that he doesn't have an excuse as to why he didn't succeed. So Caleb Williams not only is going to have DJ Moore, Roschon Johnson ready to take over, a better offensive line, whether if they address it in free agency or in the second round of this mock draft. Let's not forget, they basically have a first round pick at pick 33, so they can still grab one of these, lower edge or lower rated tackles and still be solid later on in the draft. So let's go out there and give them another option in Rome Odunze, arguably the second best wide receiver in this draft class, depending on who you ask. To me, it's a 2A, 2B situation, just like I'm sure many of you at home. But Caleb Williams has a loaded offense, and they still have money to spend on that defensive side of the ball and offensive line to get this team in a position to maybe fight for a playoff spot in 2024. At number 10, the New York Jets, excuse me. I was going to say Aaron Rodgers, which is I'm going to get to now, is he didn't have the ideal season in a Jets uniform last year. It started and then it ended really before we could really blink. And it was really because he had no protection. So we're going to make this pretty simple. You're going to draft a guy that has maybe the most potential at the offensive tackle position in Olu Fashanu, a guy out of Penn State that is super athletic, great pass blocker on the right side. I think he could also transition to the left side if need be, but I think he's going to be a right tackle in this offense. The run blocking could use some work, right? But this is a guy that could have came out last year and been maybe the offensive tackle one. He stayed another year, polished his game, and I think he has the most potential out of any tackle in this class. He goes number 10 to the New York Jets to replace a Mekhi Becton, who's been, injury riddled, but rather poor outside of that. At number 11, the Minnesota Vikings. I think this is a very interesting pick. I could see them going, as much as Vikings fans don't want me to say it, a JJ McCarthy route. And I'll talk about him in just a moment. But I'm going to go best player available. I think Kirk Cousins has another solid 2 to 3 years left. And if the general media is, for the Vikings as of right now is not sold on a guy like JJ McCarthy, why not? Let's go out there and get them just a pure game disruptor. We don't know the future of a guy like Danielle Hunter. So if he doesn't return to Minnesota, they have a huge gap on that defensive line and just overall front seven. I'm going to go give them maybe the most dominant edge player in the class in Jared Verse, a guy that could just be a huge game disruptor. And he's super fast, super athletic. And he's kind of just, kind of like a Danielle Hunter mold. So I think Jared Verse is a guy that, there's nobody that's improved their stock more over the last 2 years than this guy when he came from the FBS level all the way to a potential top 10 pick. So shout out to Jared Verse. As much as I'm a Gators fan, I have to respect Jared Verse's rise to becoming an elite pick here in 2024. At number 12, the Broncos. I'm going to catch hate for this, but, I think this is kind of this dude's floor at this point. And it might sound crazy, but I think JJ McCarthy's the pick here. And let me give you the reasoning why. Of course, I faced some backlash from my recent rankings that I put out on TikTok and Instagram, which you're not following me. Go follow me at the Anomaly Podcast _ one word, of course. But here's my reasoning behind why I think this guy can be successful at the next level. JJ McCarthy, I'll start off by saying this. He's a winner and he does exactly what he is asked to do. He did that in his entire collegiate career at the Michigan for the Michigan Wolverines. Of course, would we have liked to see him throw more than 15, 20 times a game? Yes, we would like to see more volume under his belt. However, this is a guy that did exactly what he was asked to do. And in the moments that he was asked to throw for more, he did it and at a higher level. 2 years ago against Ohio State, biggest game of the year for Michigan, what did he do? The team needed him to throw. He throws for 250 yards, great efficiency, and 3 touchdowns, 0 turnovers. JJ McCarthy can do it when asked. Of course, we would like to see more volume, but I think he can do it at the next level, and especially in a conservative scheme like Sean Payton's, where it's going to be a lot of underneath routes, a lot of dink and dunks, take what the defense gives you and move the ball down the field. JJ McCarthy would be perfect in that role, and I just don't buy into the hype that Russell Wilson's going to be back next year, but even if he is, he could be a great mentor for a guy like JJ McCarthy for the future of the Denver Broncos. So JJ at number 12 might face some heat for that, but I think he's a winner, and he could be the perfect quarterback for Sean Payton's scheme. At number 13, the Las Vegas Raiders are here, and you really never know what the Las Vegas Raiders are going to do here in the first round of drafts if they don't have the greatest history. So for that reason, I'm going to go with a player I think is very safe. I don't think he's the best interior defensive lineman in the class, but he's number 2 for me, and that is Byron Murphy out of Texas. He could be a huge disruptor in the front 7 of that offensive line. I think he's a little bit quicker and more agile than T'Vondre Sweat, which of course is a big boy, and we'll talk about him maybe later on in the draft. But Byron Murphy brings this defense a lot of athletic ability, and I think he can be the guy up front for the Raiders unit next to Mad Max Crosby. We'll have to see what they do to address the rest of the front 7 and defensive backs. At number 14, this is another team where you don't really know what the Saints are going to do. Over the last couple of years, they had some glaring holes, and they kind of just went in different directions. This is a team that's always kind of been like a best player available / we're just going to draft for upside kind of thing. And to me, maybe the best player available is the guy I'm going to give them. I think, of course, Marcus Davenport is a free agent. He might not come back. So let's replace that UTSA Roadrunner with a UCLA Bruin in Latu Latu. Personally, a top 5 favorite player for me in this class. I think he's the best edge in the class, and I think he just brings the most overall versatility, up front for the New Orleans Saints here at this point in the draft. I think this is a guy that 2 years ago was medically unable to play. He had to medically retire due to a neck injury. He transfers to UCLA, and he has an immediate impact. The last 2 years, he's improved dramatically, and I think he's the best edge in the game. Like I mentioned, he goes to the Saints and hopefully he can spell guys like Cam Jordan and, of course, Marcus Davenport, who might be out the door sooner rather than later. At pick 15, it really is going to be a cornerback for me for the Indianapolis Colts. Michael Pittman seems like a 4-lifer for me, so I think he'll be back here with AR5 next season. So that leads me to a very important decision. And Colts fans, let me know, do you prefer Terrion Arnold? Do you prefer Nate Wiggins? Or is it a guy like Quinyon Mitchell, a guy out of Toledo? Terrion Arnold, I think, is the best cornerback prospect in the class. I think I've seen that a lot going to the Indianapolis Colts. A guy like Nate Wiggins could go to the Indianapolis Colts. But I think for what the Colts want to do, they need a cornerback 1, a guy that can change the culture in that room, so to speak. I think that comes down to Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold, who are better man-to-man covers than a guy like Nate Wiggins. But if I'm doing what I think the teams will do, there's a lot of noise right now around Quinyon Mitchell, but I'm going to give Terrion Arnold to the Indianapolis Colts. I just think that he probably has the highest ceiling in this class out of any corner. Again, of course, that's up for debate, but I think he can be their number 1 corner from day 1 and, of course, take them for years and years. Of course, maybe spell for a guy like Kenny Moore, but he primarily plays in the slot. At pick 16, we're at the halfway point for the Seattle Seahawks. And, I think, of course, you could go defensive back here. Of course, even though they have a great defense, but they did just get Mike McDaniel. Now, they could go, you just grab best player available on that side of the ball. However, I'm going to go with a guy that I think will play guard at the next level, and it's a guy that's a lot of you guys think will play guard at the next level. If I could find him here, there we go. Troy Fautanu, excuse me if there's a mispronunciation, but keep him in city, keep him in state. I think this is a guy that played tackle for Washington, but also at times played guard for Washington. he has the ideal size and speed and agility to play guard at the next level. He can do that in state here for the Seattle Seahawks. They need some help desperately in that interior O-line for whatever quarterback takes over for him, right? I could see them being like a Bo Nix team, in all honesty. At 17, the Jacksonville Jaguars are here. And, I think, of course, this is another team that just needs cornerbacks. Quinton Mitchell is definitely an interesting pick for me here, but I think they're more so going to need zone cornerbacks more so than the physical man-to-man type. In all honesty, I will go Nate Wiggins, right? But I will say this: if you wanted to go Quinton Mitchell, for the Colts, these three cornerbacks are kind of interchangeable. Of course, I'm not going to fight you too hard. At 18, you have Joe Burrow, and the 2 seasons he's been healthy, he's taken you to the AFC Championship game and the Super Bowl. Of course, 1 or 2 penalty calls away from winning the Super Bowl. Just let's not forget a couple years back. And the 2 years that he has not been playing at that level or at that point in the season is because he has been hurt by devastating leg injuries. So let's protect our franchise quarterback, a guy that I think is the second best player in football when healthy. And let's go out there and get Taliese Fuaga, right? You could go out there and get a guy like J.C. Latham, Aquarius Mims. I just think Taliese Fuaga I prefer a tad bit more, whether if he wants to play on the left side or the right to replace a guy like Orlando Brown. But whatever route or whatever tackle they want to go, of course, that is up to them. The biggest thing is that they get some protection for Mr. number 9, Joe Burrow. At number 19, interesting selection here. Didn't really know where to go, but I think it could be a best player available situation. I wouldn't mind seeing them maybe go with Jackson Powers Johnson, right? But I'm going to give them Quinton Mitchell, again, best player available situation, and they still get maybe the highest potential corner in the class, of course, out of a guy in Toledo who's going to rise up draft boards. At 20, with the rival for me, Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think, it's Mike Tomlin's last year. He's going to play it very safe. He's going to play a very safe, conservative offense like he always has. But at this point, you got to stick to the identity that they've always had, and that is to dominate the trenches. The Steelers, to me, are going to grab J.C. Latham, maybe the best tackle in the class. Of course, guys like Daniel Jeremiah and some other guys are higher than him, are higher on the prospect of J.C. Latham than me. But I think the Steelers at this point, why not? Let's go get the right tackle out of Alabama, a huge right tackle. I think he's 6'7" or 6'8". Regardless, he can command that right side of the offensive line and help whoever is the quarterback there in Pittsburgh in 2024. I could also see him going with a quarterback at this point. A lot of different options for Pittsburgh. At 21, the Miami Dolphins are up, and I think at this point it could be a best player available situation. But I will say that we don't know the future of a guy like Connor Williams. So maybe he can end up in Miami. Maybe he's a free agent. So I think, let's go out there and draft a guy in Jackson Powers Johnson to command that interior offensive line and really the entire unit. I think he can be their guy for the next 10 to 15 years. Jackson Powers Johnson could be the most talented O-lineman in the class. At number 22, or at least let me clarify, on the interior. At number 22, the Eagles, they need cornerback help. Darius Slay has taken a step back. James Bradbury is a shell of what he was 5 years ago, let alone a couple years ago, right? I'm going to go with probably the best cornerback available, and that is Cooper DeJean, a guy who is underrated because of some obvious reasons, but I think he could be a very solid corner. He's a hard hitter. He plays the game the right way. I hate to bring up that cliche saying, but he really does play the game the right way. Very physical when he needs to be, but also very ball hawky, right? He can go get the ball when need be. At pick 23, the Houston Texans, man, I think this could be a trade down spot because of where they're at as far as how they played last year. But Tank Dell got hurt with a very serious injury. He might be out until playoff time next year. I think, maybe if at the latest or at the earliest, probably week 10 or so of this next year. So with that being said, CJ Stroud, they might lose Dalton Schultz this offseason, so they need some help. And, whether if they get Saquon or not, let's go out there and grab another guy that can be possibly the number 1 wide receiver for this team for years to come after Nico Collins, of course, either steps away or, goes to another team. Whatever the case is, I'm going to give them Brian Thomas Jr. I do have Troy Franklin above him, but I think the potential to be a number 1 is more so in the favor of Brian Thomas Jr. over a guy like Troy Franklin. At number 24, the Dallas Cowboys. they need some help offensively, right? We especially on the old line as Tyron Smith is set to go to free agency here pretty soon. So what am I going to do? I'm going to give them a tackle. The best one on the board is Aquarius Mims. So I'm going to give him there. He can go, or he can really do left side or right side. But of course, if he's going to spell Tyron Smith, he could slide over to that left side of the offensive line and can really just be, he could be the blind side tackle for a guy like Dak Prescott. And he's a huge human. I think he's 6'8", of course, but I think he was primarily on the right side. Regardless, I think he has the potential to do both, especially at his size. At 25, here's my shock of the draft. I'm going to go with a guy that maybe is my favorite prospect in the entire 2024 class, Cameron Kinchens. I think this is a guy that just really has a knack for the ball. We know the Green Bay Packers do anything but draft offensive players. So why not? Let's go out there and draft maybe one of the most dynamic defensive players. We saw it last year with the Baltimore Ravens. They took a shot on a guy like Kyle Hamilton, who was falling down the draft boards. Cameron Kinchens, to me, I think can have a similar impact of a Kyle Hamilton, and he can go here to the Green Bay Packers, really be the safety for them for the next 10 to 15 years. He can be what they thought Clinton Dix was going to be, but times 10. I think he has that much potential, and I really just think, if you haven't really watched him, turn on the tape for a guy like Cam Kinchens. At 26, this was another weird selection. Of course, you could go a variety of different ways for the Tampa Bay Bucks. It really, the selection here really came down to what I think, what's going to happen here with a guy like Mike Evans. Is he going to return? I think that is really what it comes down to when you at home. What do you think this team is going to do? To me, I think Mike Evans is never going to leave Tampa Bay. He's had such a decorated career here in Tampa Bay. He's going to go down as their best franchise receiver ever. I think what is his competition at this point? Joe Jurevicius or a guy like, of course, Chris Godwin. He is the best receiver in franchise history, and it's only right if he finishes his story where he has started and been so consistent over the years. Mike Evans will be back. So with that line of thinking, I wanted to go out there and kind of just do best player available. Could be Jer'Zhan Newton, could be a couple of different options. But let's go out there and replace a guy in Shaq Barrett who's recently released by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the best guy I think that could do that is Chop Robinson at this point, a guy that ran sub 4.6, I think, here at the deadline or at the combine just yesterday. But he had a very solid showing and outing here for the for of course representing the Nittany Lions. If I could talk, stick with me. At 27, the Arizona Cardinals are here. And I think it's just kind of like a best player scenario or best player available. And I think that is Jer'Zhan Newton at this point, a true game disruptor, a guy that can really move quickly up front, especially for his size. He's my number one rated interior defensive lineman, and he goes here to the Arizona Cardinals, who already drafted a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. So you get two guys that could be the pivotal parts to this next chapter of Cardinal football. At 28, the Buffalo Bills, we don't know what's going to happen with Stefon Diggs, but we haven't really heard any really news about him, so I'm expecting he's going to be back. However, a guy like Gabe Davis might not be, especially with how much money they probably have to pay him, unless he takes a hometown discount, of course. So, with the uncertainty in this offense, you found your running back of the future in James Cook. Dalton Kincaid is right there with James Cook. He's going to be a pivotal part of this offense for years to come. Stefon Diggs, if he's still there, he's still a top 15-ish receiver, so you can trust him, I think, in the long run. So why not? Stefon Diggs likes to work underneath in the intermediate routes. Let's get someone who likes to go deep and can give Josh Allen that field stretcher that he needs. And I think a guy like Troy Franklin out of Oregon is much more than a field stretcher. He is very dynamic after the run, but I think, to stretch the field for guys like Dalton Kincaid and Stefon Diggs and James Cook even, could be huge for this offense. So I think Troy Franklin can go to Buffalo and be a better version of Gabe Davis. At 29, the Detroit Lions. Shout out to them for the historic season. I'm going to give them kind of like a potential pick here. I think I like the Tyler Nubin pick here. I think the Peyton Wilson, he would fit perfectly in a Dan Campbell scheme, a guy that also showed out at the combine just yesterday. But I will say Kool-Aid McKinstry, a guy that recently had a little bit of a banged up injury, but he should be ready for the NFL training camp. I think he goes to Detroit because we don't know if CJ Gardner-Johnson will return. I'm assuming he will, especially if he gets the money he deserves. But Kool-Aid McKinstry, whether if he's a day one starter or he, spells the current starters and takes over next year, I think he has a lot of potential to be maybe the best man-to-man corner in the class. Especially that's what we all thought he was, just a year ago before Terrion Arnold really took off. At pick 30, you could go offensive tackle here, especially with Morgan Moses, getting older. I think that is definitely in the running. Tyler Nubin, of course, if you want to keep adding to this elite secondary, Peyton Wilson, I think is a guy that goes under the radar. But, especially if the Ravens plan on bringing Patrick Queen back, there's no need to get a guy like Peyton Wilson. You could go offensive line here, especially with guys like Tyler Guyton and Graham Barton. Graham Barton, I think, is the pick here for the sole reason that he can either play inside or he can play outside. So this is a guy that at college played both interior and at tackle, excuse me. Kind of like a guy like Troy Faetanu out of Washington. So Graham Barton brings that same versatility, and he can replace or spell for a guy like, Morgan Moses, who's getting up there in age. And of course, he could be on the left side of Ronnie Staley, or of course, Ronnie Staley would be on the left side. So great tackles there for Lamar Jackson in the Ravens offense going forward. At pick 31, this would have been a perfect spot for Graham Barton. So that puts me in a really interesting situation. We know Tashaun Gipson is getting up there in age. He's getting older, right? I mean, let's see what the consensus here. Tyler Guyton is a popular pick here at this point. As we know, Trent Williams, his future is uncertain. I think if they won the Super Bowl, he probably retires, if you want my full honesty. But this is the team that needs some defensive help. Of course, you could go with a cornerback here. You could go with an offensive tackle. And honestly, I think that's probably the pick. Peyton Wilson, I'm telling you guys, I've been high on him. I think he could be a very solid player at the next level. Tyler Guyton, in all honesty, let's do it. I'm going to go out there. I'll grab Tyler Guyton, a guy that could just be their right tackle for the future. And I think when Trent Williams decides to hang it up, Tyler Guyton can slide to that left side. I know he's not as versatile as some of these other guys, but he definitely has the potential. At pick 32, let's close it off here with something fun. Tyler Nubin, I think I would have liked actually to the San Francisco 49ers. So if I could go back, I would change that. And he could also go here to the Kansas City Chiefs. But let's just do something that, what everybody thinks the Chiefs should do. Let's go out there and do what they did last year and get a receiver and a weapon for Patrick Mahomes. I think A.D. Mitchell could be the pick, and I think he is the pick here. But it's interesting. You could go with a guy like Keon Coleman. There's a bunch of different options here. Xavier Worthy is a true deep threat and field stretcher. If you want to get someone underneath, Ladd McConkey. I think one thing we've learned is that Andy Reid can work with any style of receiver. I'm going to go with A.D. Mitchell here, though. A guy that could work over the top. Of course, Rashee Rice is more so. That's Stephon Diggs. Underneath and intermediate routes, A.D. Mitchell can do just a little bit of everything here. So let's take a quick look at the recap. Of course, as you see on the left side of your screen, you have my 1 through 10. Take a good look at it as it's Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake May, Marvin Harrison, Brock Bowers, Malik Nabers. Of course, a lot of offensive talent in that top 6. But it continues here as we see Joe Alt, Dallas Turner, Rome Odunze, and Olu Fashanu, as I don't know if I've ever seen this, but 9 offensive players in the top 10 picks. Kind of crazy, the direction of the NFL nowadays, right? 11 through 16 was Jared Verse, true game record for that defensive line. J.J. McCarthy, Byron Murphy, Latu, Terrion Arnold, and Troy Faetanu to stay in state for the Seattle Seahawks. 17 through 24 was Nate Wiggins, Talise Fuaga, Quinion Mitchell, J.C. Latham, Jackson Powers Johnson, Cooper DeJean, Brian Thomas Jr. to add for C.J. Stroud. That'll be fun. And at 24, Aquarius Mims. At 25 was probably the shock of the first round. Cameron Kinchens, for me, I love the prospect, and I think he could be huge at the next level. At 26 through 32 was Chop Robinson, Jerzon Newton, Troy Franklin, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Graham Barton, again, brings a lot of versatility, Tyler Guyton, and A.D. Mitchell. Let me know what you guys think about the first round, and of course, feel free to drop some comments. We're on the road to 15,000 subscribers, so if you enjoyed, subscribe, drop a like, and tell a friend to tell a friend. But until next Tuesday, when we're going to talk about some of the biggest risers and fallers of this draft class after the combine. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy. I'm out of here.